Deep in the Texas countryside, an abandoned ranch sat forlornly beneath the wide, open sky. Its wooden structures were weathered, paint peeling from the walls, and the fields were overgrown with wild grass. The ranch had been deserted for years, and local legend held that it was haunted. The story of the phantom began long before anyone could remember, whispered among the townsfolk like a chilling warning. One evening, a group of friends, Tom, Lisa, Jake, and Emily, decided to explore the old ranch. They were intrigued by the eerie stories and wanted to see if there was any truth to the rumors. They arrived just before dusk, the sun casting long shadows across the property. As they approached the main house, the wind howled through the empty windows, creating an unsettling moan. Tom, the bravest of the group, led the way as they pushed open the creaking front door. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the scent of mildew hung heavy. The house was a relic from a bygone era, with antique furniture covered in white sheets and cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. The friends felt an inexplicable chill as they stepped inside, but they dismissed it as the drafty old house. Their flashlight beams danced across the walls, revealing old photographs and faded wallpaper. Jake, ever the skeptic, scoffed at the idea of ghosts, while Emily and Lisa were more apprehensive. Tom, however, was determined to find some sign of the supernatural. They split up to explore the house, each group taking a different wing. As Lisa and Emily wandered through the dilapidated kitchen, they heard a strange noise coming from the attic. It was a soft, rhythmic thumping like footsteps. They exchanged nervous glances, their imaginations running wild with thoughts of what could be up there. Lisa suggested they investigate, and Emily reluctantly agreed. They climbed the narrow, creaky stairs to the attic. The thumping grew louder, echoing off the walls. When they reached the top, the door to the attic was slightly ajar. Lisa pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit space filled with old trunks and broken furniture. The thumping had stopped, leaving only silence. The two women scanned the attic with their flashlights, but there was no sign of anything unusual. Just as they were about to turn back, Emily noticed a figure standing in the corner. It was a shadowy shape, barely discernible, with a vague human form. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she grabbed Lisa's arm and pointed. Lisa turned, and the figure seemed to vanish. They rushed downstairs to find the others, their hearts pounding. Tom and Jake were in the living room, laughing about their own experiences. They were skeptical, but agreed to check out the attic. The group went back up, but the attic was empty, the figure gone. Back in the living room, the group decided to take a break. Tom suggested they look into the history of the ranch so they could understand more about the rumored haunting. They found an old, dusty journal hidden behind a loose floorboard. The journal belonged to the ranch's last owner, a man named Robert Larkin. The entries described a troubled time for Robert. His family had vanished mysteriously, and he was left alone on the ranch. The final pages were frantic and disjointed, mentioning voices and shadows that seemed to torment him. The last entry was a cryptic warning. The shadows are not to be trusted. They will lead you to the darkness. The friends were unsettled by the journal, but they pressed on with their investigation. They decided to explore the ranch further, hoping to uncover more clues. The sun had set completely, and the darkness seemed to envelop the property. As they walked through the overgrown fields, the feeling of being watched intensified. The group made their way to the barn, which was even older than the house. Inside, they found old farming equipment and more decaying furniture. The barn had an oppressive atmosphere, and the temperature seemed to drop significantly. As they explored, they heard a faint whispering, but it was too indistinct to understand. Suddenly, the barn door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Panic set in as they tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The whispering grew louder, and the shadows seemed to come alive, swirling around them. Emily and Lisa huddled together, while Tom and Jake tried to find a way out. The whispering turned into frantic, disembodied voices. The friends could hear snippets of the old journal's warnings mixed with cries of distress. The barn seemed to be closing in on them, the walls vibrating with an unseen force. Tom shouted for everyone to stay calm and focused on finding a way out. After what felt like an eternity, the door finally creaked open. The friends stumbled out into the night, gasping for breath. The barn was silent once more, but the sense of dread lingered. They gathered outside, their faces pale and eyes wide. They knew they had encountered something sinister, but weren't sure what it meant. As the night wore on, the group decided to leave the ranch. They felt a deep sense of unease and knew they had to get away. As they made their way to the car, They noticed that the shadows around them seemed to move, shifting in unnatural ways. The darkness seemed to follow them, closing in with each step. Just before they reached the car, Tom heard a voice, clear and sorrowful, calling his name. He turned around and saw the shadowy figure from the attic, now more defined and ghostly. The figure reached out towards him, and Tom felt a chilling cold envelop him. His friends grabbed him and pulled him into the car. They drove away from the ranch as fast as they could, the figure disappearing into the distance. The experience had left them shaken, and they vowed never to return. The ranch remained abandoned, its haunting legacy continuing to scare those who dared to venture near. Hidden in the rolling hills of Texas lay an abandoned ghost town known as Elmsville. Once a bustling mining town, it had been deserted for decades after a series of tragic events drove its residents away. The town was said to be cursed, with tales of ghostly apparitions and mysterious disappearances. A group of urban explorers eager for adventure decided to visit Elmsville. Among them were Sarah, Matt, Rachel, and Kevin. They arrived in the early afternoon, the sun casting long shadows over the empty streets. The buildings were in various states of decay, with boarded-up windows and collapsing roofs. Despite the eerie atmosphere, the group was excited to explore. They started their exploration in the old saloon, a large wooden structure that had once been the heart of the town. The interior was filled with dusty furniture and old barware. As they moved through the saloon, Matt noticed strange symbols carved into the wooden beams, symbols that looked like ancient runes. Sarah, intrigued, took photos of the symbols. The group continued to explore, moving from building to building. They found the old church, now a crumbling shell of its former self. The stained glass windows were shattered and the altar was covered in cobwebs. As they wandered through the church, they heard faint, ghostly whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. As dusk approached, the group decided to investigate the town's old jailhouse. It was a small, grim building with iron bars still intact. Inside, they found old cells and rusted shackles. The atmosphere was oppressive, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Kevin joked about the town's curse, but his laughter quickly died as the temperature in the room dropped. Rachel, feeling uneasy, wandered into one of the cells. She noticed a journal lying on a dusty cot. The journal was old and leather-bound, with pages yellowed by time. Rachel opened it and began to read aloud. The journal belonged to the town's sheriff and described a series of unfortunate events leading up to the town's abandonment. According to the journal, the town had been plagued by a series of gruesome murders and unexplained disappearances. The sheriff had been investigating a curse placed on the town by a disgruntled former resident. The final entry was a desperate plea for help, ending with the words, "The curse will never be broken. The town will remain a prison for the restless souls." As Rachel read the journal, the room grew colder, and a sense of dread filled the air. The whispers they had heard earlier grew louder, forming coherent sentences that seemed to echo from the walls. The group felt a growing sense of panic, but they tried to remain calm and continue their investigation. Nightfall brought with it an unsettling darkness. The group decided to set up camp in the old hotel, which was still relatively intact. They set up their tents and tried to make themselves comfortable, but the sense of unease never left them. The wind howled through the empty streets, carrying with it faint, mournful cries. As the night wore on, the group heard strange noises coming from outside their tents. It sounded like footsteps, dragging noises, and low murmurs. Kevin, trying to calm everyone down, went outside to investigate. He shone his flashlight into the darkness, but saw nothing. When he returned to the camp, he was visibly shaken. He had seen a shadowy figure moving between the buildings, but it vanished before he could get a closer look. Sarah, Matt, and Rachel were alarmed, but they tried to dismiss it as a trick of the light or their imagination. However, as the night progressed, the noises grew more frequent and intense. The group heard rattling chains and clanging metal, as if someone or something was moving around the town. The temperature dropped even further, and the air became thick with an oppressive feeling. The whispers from earlier turned into disembodied voices that seemed to come from all directions. Determined to understand the source of the disturbances, the group decided to visit the town's old cemetery. The cemetery was overgrown with weeds, and the gravestones were worn and illegible. They began to search for any clues that might explain the curse. Rachel found a broken headstone with a partially intact inscription. It was dedicated to a woman named Eliza Hawkins, who had been accused of witchcraft before the town's downfall. The inscription spoke of her unjust treatment and her final curse upon the town. The group realized that Eliza's curse might be the source of the hauntings they had experienced. They decided to perform a small ritual to appease Eliza's spirit and break the curse. They gathered around the broken headstone and attempted to recite a prayer they had found in an old book. As they did so, the ground beneath them began to tremble, and a cold wind swept through the cemetery. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows seemed to come alive, swirling around them. The group felt an overwhelming sense of dread as they completed the ritual. Just as they finished, a figure appeared at the edge of the cemetery, a woman with an anguished expression. She seemed to be watching them, her form fading in and out of view. The figure of Eliza Hawkins slowly approached the group, her presence growing stronger with each step. The temperature dropped even further, and the ground beneath them shook violently. The group was terrified, realizing that their ritual might have awakened something more malevolent than they anticipated. They decided to leave the cemetery and head back to their campsite. As they made their way through the ghost town, the shadows seemed to follow them, moving with an almost sentient purpose. The whispers turned into frenzied, chaotic voices that filled their ears. The group reached their campsite and quickly packed up their belongings. They were desperate to leave the cursed town and escape the malevolent presence that seemed to have taken hold. As they drove away from Elmsville, the shadows in the rearview mirror seemed to recede, but the feeling of being watched remained. The experience left them shaken, and they vowed never to return to the cursed town. Elmsville remained a ghostly reminder of the past, its curse still hanging heavy over the abandoned streets. The story of the ghost town and its haunting curse continued to scare those who dared to venture near. In a remote part of Texas stood an old abandoned hospital, once known for its innovative treatments but now infamous for its dark history. The hospital had closed down decades ago after a series of tragic events and alleged mistreatments of patients. Rumors of hauntings and supernatural occurrences surrounded the hospital, making it a popular destination for thrill seekers and paranormal investigators. A group of amateur ghost hunters, Anna, Ben, Clara, and David, decided to explore the old hospital. They arrived in the early evening, the sun dipping below the horizon as they approached the imposing building. The hospital's facade was grim and imposing, with broken windows and rusted gates. The air around it was heavy with an eerie silence. They entered through a side door that had been forced open, the hinges squeaking loudly. Inside, the hospital was a maze of dark, empty corridors and abandoned rooms. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. Anna, the leader of the group, led the way with her flashlight, while the others followed closely behind. They began their exploration in the hospital's main hall, where old medical equipment lay covered in a thick layer of dust. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the sound of their footsteps echoing through the empty spaces. The group was excited, but also wary, knowing the hospital's reputation. As they ventured deeper into the hospital, they came across a series of patient rooms, each one more decrepit than the last. The walls were covered in peeling paint and graffiti, and the floors were strewn with debris. Clara, who was particularly sensitive to the supernatural, felt a cold draft and shivered. They continued to explore, making their way to the old operating theater. The room was vast, with a raised platform in the center and old surgical instruments scattered around. As they set up their equipment and began to document their findings, David noticed a strange, shadowy figure moving in the corner of his vision. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light or a figment of his imagination, but as he turned to look, the figure became clearer. It was a translucent, ghostly figure of a woman in a hospital gown, her face a blurred mask of anguish. The figure seemed to be watching them, her eyes empty and sorrowful. The group was stunned. Ben tried to take a photograph, but the figure vanished as soon as he raised the camera. The atmosphere in the room became heavy and oppressive, and the temperature dropped significantly. Anna suggested they try to communicate with the spirit, hoping to learn more about its presence. The group set up an EVP, electronic voice phenomena recorder, to capture any voices or sounds that might be present. As they conducted their investigation, they heard strange noises, distant cries, whispers, and the sound of footsteps echoing through the halls. They decided to explore the hospital's basement, where it was rumored that the most troubling incidents had occurred. The basement was dark and damp, with rusting pipes and flickering fluorescent lights. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. As they moved through the basement, they discovered a series of locked rooms. With some effort, they managed to force one of the doors open. Inside, they found a room filled with old medical records and patient files. The records detailed horrific treatments and unethical experiments conducted on patients. The more they read, the more they realized the extent of the hospital's dark history. It seemed that many patients had suffered and died under mysterious circumstances. The files mentioned a particular doctor who had been known for his cruel practices. The doctor's name was Dr. Leonard Graves, and he had been dismissed after numerous complaints and investigations. As they continued to explore, the group began to feel an increasing sense of unease. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. Anna felt a sudden, intense cold, and saw the ghostly figure of the woman again, this time closer and more defined. The spirit seemed to be trying to communicate, but its message was unclear. Clara, feeling a strong, emotional connection, attempted to reach out to the spirit. She asked the spirit to reveal its identity and why it was haunting the hospital. The EVP recorder picked up a chilling response. "Help us, he is still here." The voice was faint but unmistakable. The group realized that the spirit was trying to tell them about Dr. Graves and his continued presence in the hospital. They decided to confront the spirit of Dr. Graves, hoping to put an end to the haunting. They made their way to the old office of Dr. Graves, where they felt the atmosphere become even more oppressive. The temperature dropped sharply, and the shadows in the room seemed to coalesce into a dark, menacing form. The spirit of Dr. Graves appeared in the office, his form dark and foreboding. He was a shadowy, distorted figure, his face twisted in anger and resentment. The group could feel his malevolent presence, and they knew they were facing something truly terrifying. Anna, trying to remain calm, spoke to the spirit. She demanded to know why he was still there and what he wanted. The spirit responded with a guttural, disjointed voice, accusing the group of intruding and disturbing his domain. The group realized that Dr. Graves was bound to the hospital by his own dark deeds. They decided to perform a ritual they had read about in the old records, hoping to free the spirits trapped in the hospital. They gathered in the operating theater, the center of the hospital's suffering, and began the ritual. As they recited the incantations, the shadows in the room seemed to writhe and twist. The temperature dropped even further, and the oppressive atmosphere reached its peak. The spirit of Dr. Graves became more agitated, his form growing more defined and aggressive. With one final, desperate plea, the group completed the ritual. The shadows and the coldness began to recede, and the ghostly figures vanished. The hospital fell silent, the oppressive presence lifting. The group, exhausted but relieved, left the hospital as dawn approached. The haunting of the old Texas hospital had ended, and the spirits were finally at peace. The hospital remained abandoned, but its dark history was now a part of the past, its haunted legacy finally laid to rest. In the vast wilderness of Texas, there was a legend about a Texas ranger who had vanished without a trace. The ranger, known as Sam Callahan, had been a well-respected figure in the local community. He was known for his bravery and dedication to his job, but one day he disappeared while on duty. Sam had been investigating a series of strange occurrences in a remote part of the state. The area was known for its rugged terrain and dense forests, and locals spoke of eerie happenings and unexplained phenomena. Sam had been determined to uncover the truth, but his investigation took a dark turn. The last anyone had heard of Sam was a radio transmission reporting strange lights and sounds in the area. After that, he was never seen again. The search for Sam was extensive, involving local law enforcement and search and rescue teams. Despite their efforts, there was no sign of him or any clue to his whereabouts. The case remained unsolved, and Sam's disappearance became the stuff of local legend. People spoke of strange lights and shadowy figures in the forest, and some even claimed to have seen Sam's ghost wandering the area. Years later, a group of friends, Jake, Laura, Mike, and Emily, decided to investigate the legend of the missing Texas Ranger. They were avid explorers and thrill seekers, always on the lookout for the next adventure. They had heard about the mysterious disappearance and were eager to experience the eerie occurrences for themselves. They arrived at the remote area where Sam had vanished, the dense forest surrounding them with its dark, foreboding presence. The air was thick with tension, and the group could feel the weight of the legends that hung over the land. They set up camp near the site where Sam had last been seen. As night fell, they began to experience strange phenomena. They heard disembodied voices and saw strange lights flickering in the distance. The forest seemed alive with movement, and the shadows danced in the corners of their vision. The group was both excited and unnerved by the experience. They decided to investigate further, hoping to find clues about Sam's disappearance. They ventured deeper into the forest, following the trail of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena. As they explored the forest, the group came across a series of unusual landmarks. They found an old cabin, its walls covered in strange symbols and markings. Inside, they discovered old photographs of Sam Callahan and notes detailing his investigation into the area. The notes spoke of a mysterious phenomenon known as the phantom lights, which had been appearing in the forest for years. Sam had been trying to uncover the truth behind these lights and their connection to the local legends. As the group examined the notes, they heard a rustling noise outside the cabin. They quickly gathered their equipment and went outside to investigate. They followed the noise and the strange lights into the forest, their excitement growing as they approached the source. Suddenly, they saw a figure in the distance, a man in a ranger uniform, his face obscured by shadows. The figure seemed to be beckoning them, leading them deeper into the forest. The group followed cautiously, their sense of unease growing with each step. The figure led them to a clearing where they found an old, abandoned campsite. The site was eerily familiar, and they realized it was the same place where Sam Callahan had last been seen. The campsite was scattered with old, rusted equipment and personal belongings. Among the items, they found a worn journal belonging to Sam. The journal detailed his experiences and findings, including his discovery of a hidden underground cave system in the area. The cave system was believed to be connected to the phantom lights and the strange occurrences in the forest. The group decided to explore the cave system, hoping to uncover the truth behind the phantom lights and Sam's disappearance. They descended into the darkness, their flashlights illuminating the narrow passages and cavernous rooms. As they explored the caves, they encountered strange symbols and artifacts, remnants of an ancient and mysterious culture. The deeper they went, the more they felt a sense of foreboding and danger. The air was thick with a palpable energy, and the shadows seemed to come alive. At the heart of the cave system, they found a large chamber with an altar in the center. The phantom lights were more intense in this area, casting eerie, flickering shadows on the walls. The group felt a powerful presence in the chamber, and they knew they were close to uncovering the truth. As they approached the altar, the figure of Sam Callahan appeared once again. This time, his face was clearer, and he looked desperate and anguished. He seemed to be trying to communicate with them, but his voice was faint and distorted. The group realized that Sam was trapped in the cave system, bound by the supernatural forces that had been affecting the area. They decided to perform a ritual to free him and put an end to the haunting. They recited incantations and performed the necessary rites, hoping to release Sam's spirit and break the curse. As they completed the ritual, the phantom lights grew dim, and the oppressive energy in the chamber began to lift. The figure of Sam seemed to become more peaceful, and the cave system fell silent. The group felt a sense of relief as they exited the caves, knowing they had uncovered the truth and put an end to the haunting. The disappearance of the Texas Ranger was finally resolved, and the legend of Sam Callahan became a tale of closure and redemption. The forest, once haunted by the phantom lights, was now a place of quiet reflection, its dark secrets finally laid to rest. In the rolling hills of Texas, there was an old, abandoned farmhouse that had been vacant for years. The farmhouse had a dark history, with rumors of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena. The locals avoided the area, and the farmhouse had become a symbol of fear and mystery. A group of college friends, Josh, Lisa, Eric, and Megan, decided to explore the farmhouse as part of their summer adventure. They had heard the stories and were eager to experience the eerie atmosphere for themselves. They arrived at the farmhouse just as the sun was setting, the sky painted with hues of orange and pink. The farmhouse was in a state of disrepair, with broken windows and a sagging roof. The overgrown yard was choked with weeds and vines, and the once grand porch was now a rotting, creaking structure. The group approached the house with a mix of excitement and trepidation. They entered through the front door, which was hanging loosely on its hinges. Inside, the farmhouse was a time capsule of decay. Dust-covered furniture and old photographs lined the walls, and the air was thick with the smell of mildew and neglect. As they explored the farmhouse, the group found a series of strange and unsettling objects. In one room, they discovered old medical equipment and jars filled with unknown substances. The items seemed out of place and gave off an unsettling vibe. In another room, they found a hidden door leading to a small underground basement. The basement was dark and musty, with old storage boxes and strange symbols painted on the walls. The group felt a growing sense of unease as they examined the basement. Among the items in the basement, they found a collection of old journals and diaries. The journals detailed the life of a family who had lived in the farmhouse many years ago. The entries spoke of strange occurrences, mysterious disappearances, and a growing sense of dread. One journal belonged to a woman named Mary Thompson, who had written about her fear of an unknown entity that seemed to be haunting the farmhouse. The entries became more frantic and disjointed, culminating in a final entry that mentioned a dark presence and unholy rituals. As night fell, the group decided to settle in for the night. They set up their sleeping bags in one of the larger rooms and tried to get some rest. However, as the darkness settled, they began to experience strange occurrences. They heard unexplained noises, scratching sounds, creaking floorboards, and whispers coming from the walls. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, and they felt a chilling breeze despite the windows being closed. Josh, who was the most skeptical of the group, tried to dismiss the noises as the house settling or drafts. However, Lisa and Megan were visibly shaken, and Eric's anxiety grew with each passing minute. The group decided to investigate the noises, and they followed the sounds to the basement. As they descended the stairs, they felt a heavy presence in the air. The basement was colder than before, and the strange symbols on the walls seemed to glow faintly. In the basement, the group discovered a hidden compartment behind one of the walls. Inside, they found an old leather-bound book with strange symbols and rituals. The book appeared to be a grimoire or a spell book, and the pages were filled with dark and unsettling content. As they examined the book, they realized that the rituals described in the book were meant to summon and control dark entities. The group felt a sense of dread, realizing that the farmhouse's dark history was tied to these rituals. Suddenly, they heard a loud crash from upstairs. The group rushed back to the main floor, their hearts pounding with fear. The room they had been sleeping in was in disarray, with furniture overturned and objects scattered. They decided to leave the farmhouse, but as they reached the front door, they found it was stuck shut. They were trapped inside, and the temperature in the house continued to drop. The whispers and scratching sounds grew louder, and the sense of a dark presence became almost unbearable. Desperate to escape, the group decided to confront the dark presence. They gathered their courage and returned to the basement, hoping to use the grimoire to understand and dispel whatever was haunting them. They performed one of the rituals from the book, reciting the incantations and following the instructions. As they completed the ritual, the temperature in the basement began to rise, and the whispers grew louder and more intense. Suddenly, a shadowy figure appeared in the basement, its form shifting and flickering like smoke. The figure seemed to be trying to communicate, but its voice was a cacophony of distorted sounds. The group felt a surge of fear and determination as they continued the ritual, their voices trembling with each word. As they finished the final incantation, the shadowy figure let out a mournful cry and began to dissipate. The temperature in the house returned to normal, and the whispers and scratching sounds ceased. The front door finally unlocked, and the group was able to escape the farmhouse. They left the property with a sense of relief and accomplishment, knowing they had faced the dark presence and uncovered the truth behind the farmhouse's haunting. The farmhouse was left behind, a reminder of the mysteries and dangers that lay within its walls. In the heart of Texas, nestled among rolling plains and vast cattle fields, stood an old ranch known for its dark past. The ranch had been in the Davidson family for generations, and each family member had met with a mysterious and untimely death. The locals whispered about a curse that had plagued the ranch, but no one knew its origin or the truth behind the legend. In the summer of 2023, a young couple, Amy and Mark, decided to buy the ranch. They were looking for a fresh start and had fallen in love with the property's charm and potential. Unaware of the ranch's dark history, They eagerly moved in and began their new life. The first few weeks were idyllic. They spent their days fixing up the old farmhouse, tending to the fields, and enjoying the peace and quiet of the rural setting. But as the days went by, they began to notice strange occurrences, unexplained noises, fleeting shadows, and an unsettling feeling of being watched. One evening, as they were working late in the barn, they heard a loud bang coming from the old family house. When they investigated, they found nothing amiss, but the eerie feeling persisted. They chalked it up to the house settling and tried to ignore their growing unease. As Amy and Mark continued to renovate the ranch, they came across several unsettling discoveries. In the attic of the farmhouse, they found a trunk filled with old family documents, photographs, and personal belongings. Among these items was a journal belonging to a past member of the Davidson family. The journal detailed strange happenings and an increasing sense of dread experienced by the family members. It spoke of a mysterious figure that would appear at night, a figure that seemed to be tied to the curse. The entries became more frantic and disjointed, culminating in a final entry that mentioned a hidden secret buried somewhere on the ranch. Intrigued and disturbed, Amy and Mark decided to investigate further. They searched the property, looking for clues to the hidden secret mentioned in the journal. They discovered an old, overgrown cemetery on the edge of the ranch with weathered headstones and faded inscriptions. Among the headstones, they found a cryptic inscription that matched a symbol found in the journal. The inscription spoke of a dark pact and a sacrifice that had been made to bind a malevolent spirit to the land. The discovery deepened their sense of dread and made them more determined to uncover the truth. As the days passed, the strange occurrences on the ranch grew more intense. Amy and Mark began experiencing vivid nightmares of shadowy figures and eerie whispers. They also noticed that their animals were acting strangely, becoming agitated and fearful for no apparent reason. One night, while investigating the barn, Amy and Mark heard footsteps echoing in the empty spaces. They saw shadowy figures moving in the corners of their vision and felt a cold, oppressive presence that made it difficult to breathe. Their once peaceful home had become a place of terror. Desperate for answers, they reached out to a local historian who had done research on the ranch's past. The historian revealed that the Davidson family had been involved in occult practices, and the curse was the result of a dark ritual gone wrong. The ritual had bound a malevolent spirit to the land, and it had been tormenting the family ever since. The historian also mentioned that the only way to break the curse was to perform a counter-ritual, which required finding the exact location of the dark pact and reversing the binding spell. With this new information, Amy and Mark felt a renewed sense of purpose and resolved to end the curse that had plagued the ranch for generations. Armed with the knowledge of the dark pact and the counter-ritual, Amy and Mark prepared for the task ahead. They spent days studying the journal and the historian's notes, gathering the necessary materials and preparing themselves mentally for the confrontation with the malevolent spirit. On a stormy night, they decided to perform the counter-ritual in the old cemetery where they had found the cryptic inscription. The storm added to the sense of foreboding, with lightning flashing across the sky and thunder rumbling in the distance. As they began the ritual, they recited the incantations and performed the required actions, all while feeling the oppressive presence of the spirit growing stronger. The shadows seemed to close in around them, and the air was thick with a palpable energy that made it difficult to concentrate. Despite the growing fear and the relentless pressure from the malevolent spirit, Amy and Mark pressed on. They completed the ritual, making the final offerings and reciting the final incantations. As they finished, they felt a sudden release of tension, and the storm outside began to abate. The next morning, Amy and Mark awoke to a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. The oppressive presence that had haunted the ranch seemed to be gone, and the atmosphere was lighter and more welcoming. The animals were calm, and the strange occurrences had ceased. They continued their renovations with a renewed sense of hope and determination. The ranch, once a place of fear and darkness, had become a symbol of their resilience and courage. The curse had been lifted, and the dark chapter of the Davidson family's history had come to an end. Amy and Mark decided to preserve the old farmhouse and the cemetery as a historical monument, honoring the memory of the past while embracing a brighter future. The ranch became a place of peace and healing, a testament to the power of courage and perseverance in the face of darkness. The story of the Texas ranch's curse became a local legend, a tale of redemption and triumph over evil. The ranch stood as a reminder of the dark past and the strength needed to overcome it, a beacon of hope in the vast Texas landscape.